Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I am your host, Jerrad Wyche, in episode 199. As always, I'm joined by Dominic Orlando,
Xbox Day, ladies and gentlemen.
my co-host with the most. Xbox Day, excited. We have one bit of quickie news before we get into the Xbox Game Showcase,
Oh,
and then pretty much we're going to be talking about video games from the Xbox platform for the rest of the show, and we'll get to some what have we been playing at the end of it. We'll start off with the one bit of quickie news, Dom. Ubisoft. Remember we had this discussion with NBA 2K increasing their price to $70 on next gen, right? And we had this whole discussion of, well, is this going to be the standard moving forward for all publishers? And Ubisoft came out this week and was like, yo, our games that are coming out next gen, fall 2020, they're going to be $60. Now, obviously, there's a caveat there of them specifically saying the games this fall. That could change moving forward, but this is the first domino to fall, right, in terms of where these publishers are going to line with their next-gen pricing. Do you think this is more so Ubisoft getting an easy marketing hit for this fall, or do you think that Ubisoft will have their games at 60, for the foreseeable future? If you're a betting man.
I'm betting that there's still a good chance Ubisoft games end up being $70 next gen at some point. A year or 2 years from now. If I had to bet, I'd say that. And they're just taking this as a quick advantage of oh yeah, our games this fall for PS5, Xbox Series X are still $60, guys. It's cool.
Yeah. Do you think it could be a thing about their cross-gen titles, right, this fall? All of them are cross-gen. You think at the moment it's an actual specifically next-gen title, that's when they can move up the price point?
Exactly, because that's the thing that kind of muddies this up is, well, you're talking about games this fall and next year that are coming out on both consoles. And there's already, obviously, we've talked a bunch about smart delivery and not paying for next gen upgrades. So it's kind of a sticky situation. So I could see where they're just kind of saying they're just still $60 for now. And then maybe when fall 2021, those time frame of games maybe start moving up into that $70 range when it's fully next gen kind of a thing. I could see it.
Yeah, sure. It's going to be interesting to see where other publishers land on this too. Obviously, 2K cast the first stone and now Ubisoft's responding, and we still don't have prices for a lot of games. We don't know. We all assume Miles Morales is going to be $40 because it seems like that weird Lost Legacy type of title, but we don't know Godfall's price, and we don't know Halo Infinite, right? Obviously, it's going to be in Game Pass. But we don't know where they're going to land as well, so it'll be interesting to see where the cards land.
That's a good point, because I was thinking about this. I don't think I've ever said it to you, though, but I think that Miles Morales could end up being $50. Because to me, it would be easier for them to justify a next-gen tax for that game, because it's still less than 60, but it's next-gen. So, last gen's $40 game is 50. The translation isn't one for one in my head. So I could see them charging 50 for it, even if on PS4 they might have only charged 40 like they did Lost Legacy. I could see that.
Yeah, and Lost Legacy wasn't a launch title for the brand new console, and they still want that game to carry some value to the eye, right? Of it's 50, it's still the type of experience I'd expect. Even though price, we've talked about multiple times, doesn't dictate necessarily quality or enjoyment of a game, but it is something to talk about the average consumer.
Yeah, I just see that as it's easier to justify that going up $10 than it is a $60 game going up $10, I guess.
Yeah. We'll see. So the way I kind of position this isn't exactly how the show went itself, but we're going to be talking about the announcements during the pre-show, during Jeff Keighley's Summer of Gaming pre-show that he had with some content creators, but they had stuff sprinkled in between. Then we're going to go through the third-party stuff, and then we're going to end with the Xbox Game Studio stuff, which isn't, like I said, necessarily how the show went, but I thought it'd be the best flow for the podcast. So we're going to start off with the pre-show, which the first announcement was really cool to a lot of Xbox players, and that was Dragon Quest XI Echoes of the Elusive Age is coming to Xbox finally. Going to be launching into Game Pass as well. It's going to be dropping December 4th of 2020. Square Enix is getting some flack afterwards, though, Dom, because it turns out... So this game is also coming to PS4 and PC, right? This is the one where you can filter between the two versions of the game, the old school and the regular version.
The S version, yeah.
Yeah, turns out that this is a port from the Nintendo Switch version of the game. So it's going to be looking not great on Xbox and PlayStation 4, which is odd. people are kind of complaining with Square Enix about like, why didn't you just add the S stuff to the PlayStation 4 version of the game, right? And then port that instead of porting over the inferior version on the Switch. It seems kind of odd. So people are kind of upset about that. My hope is that there's maybe a day one patch, right, that kind of takes advantage of the tech difference between these consoles and the Switch, hopefully.
Yeah, I imagine you would get like a resolution type of bump on the better hardware. But this was a weird thing before, because when the Switch version came out, it was definitively, everyone agreed, better than the PS4 version, right? Not necessarily because like graphically, but just content wise, there was a lot more going on. I can't remember some of the specifics, but the Switch version was one of those rare things where the Switch version beat out the PS4 version of a game. So like hearing this, the Switch version is the one that was being ported. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I don't think that the PS4 version originally like even graphically looked that much better than the Switch version anyway. So I don't think that like, I don't know, that
I've seen some screenshots. There is a noticeable difference, and I'm not even the graphics guy.
Okay.
But it's not like extreme. It's not like what was the game recently, like Doom Eternal, right, where it looks super crunchy on Switch. It's not that big of a difference.
Outer Worlds, I think, was another one where the Switch version didn't hold up,
which we'll get to later. Yeah. The other thing with this is we're now seeing that for a platform that had a long time without Japanese games, Game Pass itself, if you have Game Pass, you can now play through Kingdom Hearts, you can play Yakuza, and now you'll also be able to play Dragon Quest for the first time, which is really
all
awesome.
of Kingdom Hearts, right? Like literally all of it. Yeah.
And the first 2 or 3 Yakuzas, I think Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2 are all on Game Pass, which is incredible. I really hope that they position themselves on focusing on getting that Japanese market, maybe not necessarily consumers, because that's going to be a hard thing to break into. I think with xCloud, we've talked about with them not having to buy a console but being able to use it mobily will be a huge hit for Xbox possibly in Japan, because of just the way their society works with not having these big consoles and stuff, and they like having handhelds, or you know what I mean. And the Japanese developers, like we've already seen a partnership with From Software showing off Elden Ring, which isn't an exclusive, but they have the marketing rights, which unfortunately we didn't see today. But I wanted to mention it nonetheless. The next announcement, Exo Mecha. This is developed by Twisted Red. This is coming 2021. It looked like a mix of Evangelion and Pacific Rim. It's like Chrome X. This to me screams like a launch window game, for better or worse.
I had the same vibe.
Yeah, it looks very Japanese. It reminded me similarly to the game that opened the May showcase that's developed by one Chinese developer, with all the wind and stuff going on and the guns. You know what I'm talking about?
Can't remember. That game looked great. I remember that. Yeah, now.
That game looked incredible. This looks like a budget version of that game in terms of the scope of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that game looks like it's overreaching. This one's like, we're doing exactly what we can with our budget.
It reminded me a bit of like Godfall, but maybe a little worse, where, the feedback when you like hit an enemy or attacked an enemy, it just felt like nothing happened. Like your animation like hit the enemy with your weapon or whatever, and then it just kind of felt flat. I don't know.
It's like, have you ever seen the Earth Defense Force games where you kill the giant insects? You ever see those games? Japanese games with a heavy fan base. It's like that, but with Chrome Mechs. If it goes into Game Pass, I'll definitely check it out. Yeah. But I don't know how many copies it's going to sell, but hey, it might do well on Game Pass. Cool name, though. Exo Mecha is a really cool name. Next up, Watch Dogs Legion trailer. Not much to say there. We talked about this during the Ubisoft Forward reactions. Just another trailer for that game. Next up, this is one of the cool games that I think if it ends up reviewing well could be one of those indie hits. Echo Generation. So this is going to be at 2021. It's being developed by Coco Cucumber. I wrote down Stranger Things meets 3D Dot Heroes. I don't know if you remember that PS3 game 3D Dot Heroes that had the pixelated kind of Lego-y art style to it. The music in this trailer, 100% Stranger Things.
Yeah.
There was like some turn-based combat we saw. There was some environment exploration. I don't know if you remember the shot, Dom, of the kid walking up through like the field of grass up to that building. So beautiful.
I say, in addition to Stranger Things, I think the other comparison, and I've never played this game, but to me, from what I know of it, it looked a lot like Earthbound.
Ooh, good point. Yeah,
The
like
SNES
little
game.
kids on an adventure, a little creepy, a little
Yeah.
weird, but a little like there's some humor elements in it. I'm interested to see the full breadth of gameplay. The turn-based combat had me interested because the markers for your health and stuff were like these little playing cards, right, with the character's picture and their name on it, which I thought was a neat aesthetic. And the set of villains looks interesting because it starts off with the Five Nights at Freddy's puppeteer looking thing, but at the end there's like a giant alien worm that looks like the thing out of Mass Effect, right? So really cool. I love seeing new games with beautiful art styles that I didn't know about before, and this immediately went from me not knowing it exists to being on my radar of an indie game I definitely want to check out. Right? I don't know if you feel the
Is-
same.
Yeah, it was very eye catching. I had the same kind of reaction where like it was pre-show, so I was like, only kind of paying attention. So, but then like, yeah, I saw this come up. I was like, oh, that's cool. What's going on here? Right? Same
Yeah,
kind of thing.
and if the narrative can hit as well, because there were some dialogue options and stuff in there as well. I'm interested to see how fully fledged and developed this game is if it's not more than just a neat little indie title. Next up, Hello Neighbor 2 coming 2021. Have you ever played Hello Neighbor?
No.
So Hello Neighbor is a huge indie hit. You've probably heard about it a million times, at least the
Hmm.
name of the game. And I actually recently played it, probably like recently, I'm saying like 6 months ago. And all the game is it's like you have this small neighborhood. It's your house, a couple of other houses on your side of the street that are just there for decoration. And then across the street you have this neighbor, right? Very creepy Ned Flanders looking guy. You see him in this trailer as well. And the whole point of it is for you to sneak into his house and figure out what he's hiding in his house and in his basement without him finding you or capturing you, right? And that's the whole hook
God.
of the game. So you go into his house once, you might search around, find a key. By the time he starts finding you and chasing you, you have to get back to across the street to your house. Then you wait for him to go about his routine, and then you go back, right? So that's the gameplay loop. This
Fucking
and it
so
goes
weird.
it goes to crazy places. He upgrades his house, so as you find stuff, he'll upgrade his house with new parts and everything, and it's a lot of environmental storytelling. This game, the big hook for this, the sequel, they're introducing a second neighbor. So you see that weird like plague mask thing, right? Like what the hell is going on with this? And at the very end of the trailer, it's revealed that it was him in a costume, seemingly, because he throws like the plague doctor costume into the fire. Unless he just killed that guy, who knows? So it's taking that concept and building on it. Instead of it's one neighbor, it's multiple neighbors now, or maybe he has two houses, right? I think this will be a really dope Game Pass game. I don't know how well it'll sell necessarily on console, but it's a huge hit, Dom, with the younger audience. Like the kids who are playing Fortnite are playing the hell out of Minecraft and they're playing the hell out of Hello Neighbor. It's like one of those playground games kids talk about because it is kind of weird and creepy, but it is fun to try to figure out what's going on and scare yourself a little bit. So
This is in that category of like, wow, that's an interesting game.
yeah,
But I don't know that I fully get it. But God bless it. That's hilarious, and I'm glad it exists. That's for sure.
yeah, it's cool to finally see them doing a sequel because for the longest time I think they had been updating the game with new additions, and now that they're finally pulling the trigger on a sequel, because this could totally be an expansion too, right? Like the extra neighbor expansion or something like that. But like I said, this may not be a huge hit for us two, but this game is super
Still
popular,
cool.
especially like on YouTube and Twitch and stuff. Man, kids love it. Next up, we had ID at Xbox. Their montage had 15 indie titles in it. They actually released an article alongside this that went into detail on all of them. Most of them are ones we've seen before, so we had 12 minutes, which looks dope. Still slated for 2020. I really hope that's a launch title. And all the 15 games they talked about are coming first to Xbox on console, so they'll eventually make their way to PlayStation, which is really cool as well. We had Tunic, which is the Zelda-like Fox game. Still no date on that, unfortunately. They showed Sable, which is the voxely cell shaded Destiny looking character in the desert, where he rides like a speed bike, like a speeder from Star Wars. They showed off Lake, which is the post delivery game, the mail delivery game, which seems to be. I feel like that game on the surface looks like, oh, you're just a girl delivering mail, and by the end of it, there's gonna be like a really heartbreaking narrative conclusion where something just goes awfully wrong. It seems too chill and like relaxed for something crazy in the story not to go completely left. Um, that's one that it could be a goose game where it's like, oh, neat little concept for an indie game, or it could be Gone Home, where you just take on this girl's story and figure out something heartbreaking or sad that she went through in her life. and you piece it together as you deliver the mail. Who knows? The other one I wanted to mention is, do you remember the musical side scroller Artful Escape, Dom, that they've showed in the last couple of E3s at Microsoft, where it's a guy like playing the guitar and a bunch of crazy stuff happens? It's like a Willy
Yes.
Wonka acid trip.
Yeah.
They also talked about that as well. A lot of other games. I highly suggest going to the Xbox Wire article where they list all the 15 titles. Like I said before, all coming first to Xbox, which is really cool. I can't wait in the coming months and years to get dates for these games. It's one of the tough things about indie titles is you see those concepts right away, Dom, and then you're like, oh, this is super interesting. I can't wait for it. And then because of indie development and game development in general being so difficult, we have to wait years, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's the case. Next up, Balan Wonderworld. So this is the first game from Square Enix's action game division, Balan Company. It's going to be coming out spring 2021. It's being the game director for the title is Yuji Naka, which may not seem like a familiar name, but he was the guy who was the head of Sonic Team for the longest time. And so he has a lot of cachet, especially with the Japanese audience in terms of his portfolio. This game, it takes place in a musical theater setting, and it seems like the whole concept of it is you're going to be exchanging suits to get different powers and use them. So think of like Mega Man-esque, except you're just changing the outfits. You don't have to defeat the bosses. They mentioned something about a single button. So I don't know if it's going to be one of those titles that's like a simple concept, but with the outfits, you're going to be able to do crazier stuff with the use of that single button. One thing I haven't seen people mention with this game too, because it's a single button type of game, I wonder how that's going to do with people who need the like accessibility controller to play this, right? Because if it's a game where you're only using a single button prompt, that could make it an experience a lot more people can undertake, right? So interesting there. I don't know how this game did for you. For me, it's like, oh, it's a cute little like chibi inspired Japanese game, but totally not my jam in terms of, pulling me in.
I missed the entire last 10 minutes of the pre-show. So this whole indie, I need to go to that Xbox Wire article you're talking about and like catch up on these 15 games. So.
Well, this one wasn't part of the ID at Xbox. This was like its own announcement.
Okay.
Square Enix had been teasing this Balan Company thing as their action game division. To me, it reads like this is our competitor to like what's the really popular action game developer? Platinum Games. It seems like their answer to that of like we want to create action games, and this one out of the gate doesn't necessarily seem like it's for the Platinum crowd. It seems for a younger generation, but the message behind the game was very positive. Like they wanted this game just to be a good time, and in the current times we're living in, games with optimism behind them seem like a real good place to go with your time. So interesting to see how that shapes up. Once again, spring 2021 for that. Now we're going to get into this rock block of third-party launch exclusives. We'll get into our predictions later, Dom. But remember, one of the questions was, will Xbox have third-party launch exclusives? And I was like, I don't think so. I think they'd rather spend their money on Game Pass, which is something we'll get into later because I was partially right, but partially way wrong. You were the one that said, of course they're going to have third-party launch exclusives. Jerrad, are you ridiculous? I was ridiculous. So we're going to get into this block. All of these games are launching first on Xbox Series X and will likely come to other platforms, including PlayStation later. The first one, Stalker 2. I had to look into this one, Don, because it didn't do much for me on the surface. I was like, what is this game? I looked into it. Apparently, this has been a highly anticipated survival horror sequel.
People love this shit. Like,
yeah,
I was cool with the vibe of it as the trailer started. I'm like, oh, this looks interesting, and then it's, it finally shows like Stalker 2, and I'm like, yeah, I've never played any of these games, but like I know that there's like a group of people out there that are like hardcore, like Stalker is the dopest shit ever. So I think this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's like Arma, right? The Arma series on PC. No one ever talks about Arma, but Arma's huge. Like people love Arma. And obviously PUBG came out of the whole mod for Arma and all of that. So yeah, it was really cool to see. I'm interested. The original Stalker was released in like 2009, I believe is what I read. So 11 years later, if they can pull in an audience, and to my understanding, Stalker's huge on PC. It doesn't really have like a console footprint. So this coming first to console is pretty huge. And I do think people are excited for some more survival horror, depending on how good or bad it is. Next up, we had Warhammer 40K Darktide. Interesting. I don't know. Warhammer, it seems like they have 10 games every year that come out, and I know a couple of people that play them. That's pretty much it. Um, it just looks like a wave based, lots of enemies on screen, smashing them up. Kind of like the D&D games that have been of late, the Vermintide games, right? Where it's like a bunch of rat style enemies and you're just working your way through with friends in a co-op where there's not a whole lot of narrative there. It's just about killing as many enemies on screen as you can. Um, Warhammer's weird because I think of Warhammer as a fantasy property, and then you see like modern futuristic stuff, and I'm like, oh, it just spans everywhere. It's everything. Warhammer is everything. Did this do anything for you? It's just like, okay, that's Warhammer, not for me, but people who love Warhammer are gonna be stoked.
So I'll admit, like, yeah, that I've heard of this franchise, and I feel like every time I hear of it or see it, it just kind of like in one ear out the other. I've never given it like even a good close look because the trailer was like interesting. I'm like, oh, this is kind of spooky. Like, like what's going on here? This could be cool. And then as soon as it popped up Warhammer, and I was like, I immediately diverted to this state of ignorance of like, oh, it's okay, it's just one of these games. But I don't really know what one of these games means. So I need.
Yeah,
to
they're
look
usually
closer.
just first person kill fests. That's pretty much all it is. You're
Okay.
just hammering away at hundreds of enemies with different items or guns or weapons and just slaughtering as many people as you can in your path.
Okay.
Warhammer. So I used to play Magic the Gathering quite a bit and go to like a local game shop, right, where they sell comics and you could go in the back and play Magic or uh, Yu-Gi-Oh. And the dudes who would come in for Warhammer nights, there's like these giant landscapes they would bring with them, and you had the Warhammer figures, and it's just like this where you could have an army of like fantasy type dudes, or you can have an army of an actual army, and it's a strategy game, and it's like a lot of investment. People paint their own Warhammer figurines. It's a really cool hobby, but it seems like it takes a lot to get into, which is cool that they have like a video game vertical for people who necessarily maybe not want to invest all of that into Warhammer, but still maybe love the lore, right, and the world of the IP. So pretty interesting. If this ever comes to Game Pass, I'll smash some demons or whatever the heck they were fighting for a bit. Who knows? Next up, this one's odd. So this is a world premiere, but it technically is just like a new version of a game that was a stellar hit on the PS4, which is Tetris Effect. So we got the trailer for Tetris Effect Connected. The big thing here is it's bringing multiplayer, which I guess I just always assumed the original Tetris Effect had multiplayer, but I guess it was just a single player suite. People love the music in that game. One of the songs was featured in this trailer, which was super dope. I actually went to Spotify and immediately added it to my Spotify. I'm a Tetris guy. I love Tetris. I never got into Tetris Effect because I've always been an Xbox first person, and I only got the PS4 for Spider-Man, right? Have you tried Tetris Effect at all? Are you a Tetris
No.
person?
I'm not really. I mean, yeah, I've played some Tetris in my days. You know, it sounds
You
so
sounded
silly.
so old there, man.
Yeah,
I've
back on
played
like
some Tetris.
back on Game Boy Color, which was my first Game Boy. Yeah, we had the old Tetris carts from the original Game Boy, and that was like, you know, you go through the phase of Tetris is a fun, cool game, and it's a perfect game. I'd say it's in that realm, but it's also just
for sure.
Tetris. Right?
Yeah.
So no, I never got into Tetris Effect, but isn't that a VR game too? Am I tripping?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a
Okay.
whole experience, man.
Okay. That would be cool. I might like when the day comes, if I ever get a VR unit, then that'd be something I'd looking to try.
This just seems like a vibe out game. Like, just if you want a good time to just chill and play and enjoy some tunes, it looks really cool. I'm excited Xbox is getting Tetris Effect finally, because a lot of people laud that for being one of the best PS4 exclusives, period, right? Which is kind of like, to your point, it is just Tetris when you boil it down. But hey, man, if you nail that formula with a good soundtrack, people are going to love it, because it is, at its base, such a perfect game. Tetris is awesome.
They're pure
Unadulterated
Tetris
perfection.
blocks.
Yeah. Next up, this one was interesting. So this is from the creators of SteamWorld. I love SteamWorld Dig. If you played any of the SteamWorld games, they're really solid 2D platformers, Metroidvanias for the most part. This one's coming 2021. It's called The Gunk. Features a black protagonist, this girl who lands on this planet. She looks like an explorer of some sort, and it seems like her mission is to go out and find, my assumption on the trailer is like habitable spaces. Like, I don't know if they're trying to restart the human colony or what exactly is happening, but she's going out and exploring these worlds, and there's like this gunk mechanic with her vacuum. Gave me some like Super Mario Sunshine vibes in that way. Especially at the end when there's like this whole blockage and she sucks it up and she goes through this tunnel and it opens up this whole new area. I think this could be really cool. I don't think it showed necessarily the best. I think there could have been a couple more shots of the world at large. And I'm also, I don't know if you feel the same way, Dom. I'm not sure exactly what the gameplay loop is. Is this a survival game where I'm going out getting stuff and then crafting? Is this like an open world game? You know what I mean? Where I'm checking out boxes? I don't exactly know what the game is.
Yeah. I don't know either.
Yeah. Real quick, mentioning that it is a female black protagonist, I do think that Xbox did a great job at diversity in this whole presentation. There was a bunch of different types of protagonists on screen and characters in general. It wasn't just a bunch of white dudes walking towards the camera with the gun. You know what I mean? Which is awesome to see. Next up, speaking of not a white dude, The Medium.
Oh.
This is a horror game that we saw during the May event, and it looked really cool, but we weren't sure exactly what's the thing with this game. Like, we saw her going between two spaces, but what's happening there? And from what it seems, and I could be wrong, I want you to tell me, Dom, if you feel the same way. When they popped up and they showed the simultaneous gameplay that's happening at the same time between the two worlds, did you read that as it's split screen and you're playing both at the same time, or do you think it's you're switching back and forth between the two?
This is actually a question I wanted to ask you because I didn't know.
Either
what
way,
the hell
cool.
was-
Yeah.
Yeah. It looked incredible, but it was also, I'm not really sure entirely what's going on here. I'm in. I'm all in. This looks dope.
Yeah.
And this is right up my alley, but I have a lot of questions still. And it, yeah, I don't know.
It brought me back to Titanfall 2, right? You know the mission everyone loves, the time loop mission where you're going back and forth between. I'm down either way. I think if it's like a split screen thing where you're playing both of them in real time at the same time, that gets me more excited because it is a new gameplay experience.
Totally.
If it is
innovative
just
then.
switching back and forth, I'm still 100% down. I'm excited. But the
Mhm.
other one excites me a little bit more. What were we talking about last week in terms of like new gameplay experiences? Watch Dogs Legion, right?
Yes.
The reason I'm so excited for that game is because it is something I haven't done in a video game before, right? And with the Medium, if it is the one we were talking about where it's like split screen in real time at the same time, that's what gets me excited for next gen. It's something I haven't played before. But yeah, we're
And this
both
was the
down. We're both
game-
in.
This was the game where the dev had said, like, we're building this for Series X because we couldn't do this the way we want to on the current consoles, right? So that's cool too, because maybe like that plays into this weird, gameplay element of like, it's something that the tech has helped driving. Is kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily 100% for launch exclusives generally because obviously we want everyone to be able to play dope games. But in the same sense, something that we have to bring up is if Microsoft funding this in any way will lead to a sequel if this game is good enough and sells well enough, I'm 100% down for that because, sometimes that's just the way the business goes. You have to make these
Mhm.
deals in order for stuff to happen. So,
Yeah.
Next up, something that necessarily isn't for both of us, but I know a lot of people are super stoked. A new expansion for Phantasy Star Online 2 is coming, called New Genesis, coming in 2021.
Yeah.
If you remember last E3, a lot of people lost their mind because people have been waiting a long time for PSO2 to come to the West, and Phil Spencer made it happen, and the beta happened first on Xbox, and then it came to PC as well. So, once again, we talked about the Japanese developers coming over and putting their stuff on Xbox. The catalog in general of having games for everybody, right? That's the whole point of these shows when they're very good. It's like, I don't expect everything to be for me. That's a little selfish and self-entitled. But having something for everyone. I know somebody was watching the show and they might not have cared at all about the Medium, Dom, but once they saw this new expansion for Phantasy Star Online 2, lost their dang minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah, this was one where I was okay. Sure.
a pee break game. A pee break
Yeah.
game. Yeah. It's crazy because it's like swords and then like mechs and then you change to a gun. What I will say, no opinion on the game. Bad faces. Faces very weird.
I had initially thought that this was what's the Nintendo game? Why can't I think of the name all of a sudden? Oh, it's an RPG series. Xenoblade. I thought this was I thought this was Xenoblade for a minute. I'm like, this might be cool. I don't know. It's just not in my ballpark. But like you said, I'm sure that there's a big old audience that's like fucking lit for this. So that's cool.
This actually reminded me, I cannot wait for that Monster Hunter World 2 announcement because that game sold so well
It's coming.
that
We know
we're
it's
getting
coming,
a
man.
sequel.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I just want to hunt big things with a sword.
Hmm.
Next up, Crossfire X. We got the campaign for this. So, if you're unfamiliar, this is a first-person shooter that's really big in South Korea and China, like Call of Duty levels of huge, super popular. They partnered with Remedy, yes, that Remedy, Control Remedy, to make the single player for this game, and that alone has me excited because like Crossfire X, it kind of reads as just your generic first-person shooter, yada yada yada. This trailer for that campaign had some like GI Joe stuff going on, some like slight Metal Gear Solid stuff going on with Remedy's design for the weird and innate and kind of creepy. I'm down to see more of this. I like the trailer. I'll probably never touch the multiplayer parts of this because I've heard that
Hmm.
it doesn't necessarily work well with Western standards for shooters. But I'm down for a Remedy campaign with some weird military stuff going on, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Give me, is this Control Alan Wake in a different setting, kind of a, like you said, Remedy? Let's go. I'll play a campaign.
Yeah, if this is the closest we'll get to a new Metal Gear game, I think some people will dip their toe in and check it out. Next up, this wasn't a third party launch exclusive thing, but this falls in the realm of third party. And I think this is huge too. Might not be for everybody, but I love seeing Bungie and Microsoft
Hmm.
working together again. Destiny 2 is coming to Game Pass on November 10th, which is big in and of itself, but it's also coming with all of the expansions that are currently out, which is also huge. And on top of that, if you have Game Pass Ultimate, you'll be able to play Destiny 2 on mobile through XCloud, which is also huge. So a bunch of big news for Destiny 2. We saw once they left Activision, Bungie did. They kind of are now obviously free agents in indie, and they probably were looking to partner with somebody for the future of Destiny in terms of marketing. And I think Microsoft kind of, in a way, felt bad for the way the relationship ended with Bungie right after Halo. So it's just cool to see them working together again. I might hop into Destiny 2 this fall just because everything's on Game Pass. Will I be hooked? Likely not, but I can try all of it out for free, which is really, well, free, quote unquote, Game Pass. But I think it's a huge announcement. And they also mentioned the 4K 60 FPS update coming to Xbox Series X as well, which is great. Um, I think this is good for the legs of Destiny 2, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. This from a lot of people's perspective, this was probably like, all right, yeah, okay, Destiny. I mean, we already knew about this expansion. Who cares? Whatever. This is stupid. But the Game Pass part of this makes it a big deal. I'm with you 100%. And yeah, it's good news. Like, yeah, for like you said, for the longevity of Destiny 2 in itself. So I think it's cool.
In terms of the pacing, I think the two biggest those moments you just talked about were the Watch Dogs Legion trailer and this, and I thought
Hmm.
they didn't stay too long. I think they
No,
didn't
yeah,
overstay their welcome at all. They're in, they're
yeah,
out. Because the moment she announced the Destiny 2 thing and then she said, let's see a trailer for Beyond Light, I was like, oh God. And the trailer was like 25, 30 seconds. I was like in
yeah.
and out. I was like,
Not bad.
okay, cool. Let's get
Plus,
to
it
the
looks
big boys
cool.
though.
Like
Yeah,
it's
it does.
even if you don't play Destiny, you're like, that looks cool. That's pretty sweet. Oh, Destiny 2? Probably not gonna play it. That was a fun trailer to watch though. I don't know.
But even if you don't get an Xbox Series X, imagine all the kids this fall who can get Destiny 2 on Game Pass and play with their friends and have all of that content, all of those expansions.
Because there's a
Huge.
bunch of expansions for that game, right?
Yeah.
Like five or a lot, right? Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
DLC.
And that's not just expansions. You also have to throw in all of like the medium updates and the seasonal updates and all of that stuff too. A lot of content there. Now that we're over with all that, let's get to the big boys, Tom. Let's get to Xbox Game Studios, the first party titles and partnerships that they're doing. A lot to go through. I want to start with this. It happened two announcements later, but I think it's the most prominent thing. Phil Spencer came up in his beautiful Halo Infinite blue t-shirt that I totally want. Finally got a mic.
Very
He
cool.
appeared in all of these other presentations with his grandfather's mic. Nope, put in the budget for this, which is funny. It could have been a red herring of like, I'm going to save the best for when we're on my show. You know what I mean? Let me do with what I can here at my own home office, but when we do ours, I'm going to, make sure it looks professional. He came out and he said, set expectations. We're going to show 9 studio games. Out of the 15, we're going to show 9, which I think was good because it did set those expectations of, hey, just understand we're not showing everything. I want to let you know we're showing 9 of the 15 studios, which I thought was great. And then he dropped this bombshell that I thought got underreported, that I thought was such a baller move. All the games you're going to see today, you're going to get on Game Pass if you're a subscriber. All of them. 100%.
Dude,
No
that
exceptions.
that line that to me is the headline. That is like the nuke, the grenade that kind of like makes this whole conference, this whole showcase like boom, like this. That's the whole point. To me, that was
Yeah.
like, that's everything right here. That's what makes this all like next level. That's what puts it, that's the defining feature of where they're going.
Well, yeah, then the marketing behind, yo, you may have to spend 400 to 500 on our new console, but if you subscribe to Game Pass, this whole lineup we just showed you, you get that day one when they launch. The value prop is huge. But let's get into the actual games now. Oh, that's great. Phil Spencer, awesome. Let's get into the actual games. We're going to start with the big boy, the one everyone tuned in for, the one that was confirmed, Halo Infinite from 343. So we both predicted it was going to cold open the show, and boy, did it ever. They had the countdown, which was really cool, and then it led straight into a cutscene for Halo Infinite that led into gameplay. The cutscene was followed by extended gameplay, obviously, and then it ends with the introduction of the campaign's brute villain, which I don't think we got a name for. He called out Atriox. They're fighting in the name of Atriox. I loved his speech where he was like, two legends battle. This will live in history long after we die or whatever. I was like, oh, sick. And then he's like, Master Chief, bear your tusks or whatever. I just thought it was a really cool speech that was well delivered. A little hard to understand at times, but I think it's the point of the characters. He's an alien trying to talk. It's like you wouldn't expect him to have perfect human dialogue, right? I think he got the point across. Another standout for me was, and we'll get into the gameplay specifically, I thought the performance by the pilot was really good at the beginning.
Yes.
And I do think it solves a major problem with Halo, with Master Chief being behind that uniform. You have a human connection. You have somebody who has stakes and you have to care about, because Cortana's no longer there. And even then, Cortana is like this AI, so it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to like care about it. You have this human connection. You know he has a family. Remember the teaser? We know about that. We'll probably learn about that in the game as well. And I think at moments, he'll be what ties to you caring about the narrative of the game. And I thought his performance, I was sold on his character. Normally, you see humans in a Halo game. It's like, that's just human number 2 giving me directions, yada, yada, yada.
They're about to get slaughtered when they get in my Warthog later, right?
Exactly. I feel for this guy in the short time. Obviously, I don't super care about him yet, but I can feel the roots there building into me of like, man, if this guy dies, I'm going to be so sad. With that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. I don't have any specifics written down. I just, off the cuff, Dom, what did you find most exciting about the gameplay you saw?
Most exciting was this is a giant Halo, and it's the Halo, and as far as you can tell, like this, it's open and you can just go and do things in whatever direction and order you want. They emphasize that when Chief gets on that lift, right? Then he looks out onto the horizon, and you're like, oh crap, look at all that stuff. It reminded me of like those moments in Dark Souls when you get to a top, the top of a big building and you can see the rest of the world where you just were. And you're like, oh wow, that's incredible. Like that's the world I'm playing in. That's what it felt like, and that was cool. That along with when he opened up the map and it was just a holographic map or whatever, like you press select for, which is new for Halo though, and it showed like this is a big old level. There's a lot going on here, and we can explore and do all sorts of different things out here. Like that's what was like next level about this, and what I think made this cool. Like that's what made this not just another Halo game, right? Like that's what's going to set it apart. I was high on it.
I think too, a big thing going in, we heard rumblings of this grappling hook, and in 5 minutes they sold me on it. They sold me on individual combat encounters where you can pull yourself towards an enemy, but they also sold it later when he pulled an energy container to him, grabbed it, and then was able to throw it at somebody. I thought that's huge too. It's showing multi-purpose. And then traversal, right? He uses it to get up to that bridge area where there's a broken bridge on that hill. So they showed 3 different ways to use that grappling hook and show its effectiveness. And then they had the slide mechanic too. Obviously, introducing new mechanics like that into Halo is pretty divisive because people love the OG no sprint stuff. And I'm of the camp that like I love the classic Halo, but it does need to refine itself in a modern way. So that way it does get the fan base of gamers who didn't grow up with that OG Halo, and they can fall in love with the new version of Halo where it still is classic. I think the big concern people have is with the expanded scope, is there still going to be the strong narrative elements there? And I do think they sold that as well, because as big and open as the map looked, the moment he went up to the top and the story beat started, it wasn't like Destiny where a lot of the story stuff is still happening in gameplay at the same time. This was like a steady cutscene where you're focusing on the actual narrative of the game. So I'm not concerned with that. I think they kind of sold me on not having to worry about that. And I don't think it's an open world game. To your point, I do think it's
Yeah.
open spaces, right? Where there's just these large, vast
Big levels.
playgrounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
No,
looked incredible.
This is the type of game they have like one of the hardest jobs in the world of balancing what you started to talk about like, the originalists, the OGs who are like, do not mess with my Halo formula. I want it to play exactly like this. Because during some of those initial gunfights, I got that vibe of like, yeah, this looks like Halo. This looks like Halo combat. Really tight, refined Halo combat, but that's what it looks like. It wasn't blowing my mind. But there's probably a lot of people who are like super happy about that, right?
Yeah.
Like they didn't change that very core feel of it too much. You still have that assault rifle without, zooming in. And a lot of that is still the same, just refined. But they add a little bit, this grappling hook mechanic, which is like, it's new, but it doesn't alter, and it doesn't alter that fundamental thing, that gameplay that everyone loves about it, right? That feel. So I think, to me, they had a hard task ahead of them to try to find that balance of like doing new and innovative stuff, but also, still pleasing the OG fans. And I don't know how you do that any better than how they did, based on this trailer.
Well, and I think the thing too we often forget about is people want to position Halo against God of War or Last of Us because it is obviously Xbox's number one AAA franchise, right? That everyone knows about. And to the single player perspective, yeah, it needs to try to meet that and have a captivating single player, but they also have the issue of trying to release a multiplayer suite that people fall in love with and is incredible as well, right? Which is, you can compare it to Call of Duty in a sense, but Call of Duty doesn't necessarily market their campaign in the same way Halo markets its campaign and multiplayer. It's a very hard feat to do. And for them to sell people, for them to sell people today on the single player is great. And we still don't know much about the multiplayer. I could see this game coming out with no battle royale, and then in a year that being the big update, right? Of like, yo, we're releasing Halo Battle Royale, and it could be a Warzone situation where it's a separate download, or it could work with the same title or whatever. But I'm very excited for Halo Infinite. We had some additional details though, Dom. I don't know if you saw these after the event happened. So there's some additional details by 343 in the interview by Ryan McCaffrey over at IGN. Good work by Ryan McCaffrey. So 343 sees Halo Infinite as a platform to grow over time. Last standalone release for foreseeable future. New story content will be for Halo Infinite. And then they'll also be offering a free ray tracing update after launch. So it is going to be a platform, but what it seems like is we might get story expansions added to Halo, which hasn't really ever been done before. We've gotten obviously new maps and stuff like that. But instead of ushering in a new like Halo 6 or 7 or whatever they'd call it, a main line, it seems like they'd rather just add new story content to this and make sense with the name Halo Infinite, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is all, I saw those details. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. We all kind of suspected this based on the name Infinite, right? But yeah, that sounds great. I'm in.
I do think we shouldn't hold our breath I do think there is still a place where we could get an ODS tier or Reach. I think this is more so them talking about this is the last standalone release for mainline Halo, right? This is the main project. And then the ray tracing update, obviously, yeah. Some people are like, how come that isn't at launch? I think without COVID, it probably would have been for launch, but a lot of these studios have to make sacrifices. And I'm like, if I'm getting a ray tracing update afterwards, it's completely fine if it makes it so you hit your launch date for the game. Like, ray tracing, though it's something I look forward to on next gen, is an end all be all for my next gen experience, right? Kind of like with Spider-Man Miles Morales and them saying the game mode being optional 4K 60. People are like, well, why is it optional? That's weird. Like, what's the trade-off there? And to me, I'm like, whatever you got to do to get this game out, get it out. I'll deal with the issues because we are at the beginning of a console. And I do think people are having this weird idea in their brains of like, well, Horizon Zero Dawn and Spider-Man don't necessarily look like Last of Us or, these other titles. Like, well, yeah, those are at the end of a console where people have all this experience with it. We're going to have some rough patches where we're still going to get incredible games, but they're not going to be as polished as these mid to late gen titles, right?
I would actually say, in addition to you're right, you got it right on. It's like, okay, yeah, ray tracing, they needed a couple extra weeks, months, whatever, like to get it done. And like, you know what, better that than like delay the whole game out of the launch window, right?
Yeah.
For Series X. Yeah, I just it's to me, I'd say the transparency is cool instead of it coming out on launch day and then
Yeah.
like Digital Foundry puts a video out and then everyone's like, where's my damn ray tracing? They're saying it now, you know. Yeah, it's a little bit buried by all the cool stuff, but they're still being transparent about it and like way ahead of time, which I applaud, because they probably are still like, part of them would like to get that done in time for launch, right? But
Yeah.
they don't see it happening, so they're like, we're gonna be honest with you guys, that's coming later.
And Halo's also going through currently the Spider-Man puddle situation on Twitter too, which is like so dumb.
I hate that shit, dude.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Anyways, let's move on.
Yeah.
One of the biggest surprises to me, and though it was only a CG trailer, I want to talk about the implications of what this trailer means. And that's the Undead Labs trailer for State of Decay 3. It started with a woman, once again, a black woman, which is dope, in a forest at a campfire. And this wolf comes up on her and she screams at it. It's very kind of terrifying.
which had me like pushed back.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, I'm cool.
It was a very visceral, guttural scream. Like she was like, "I'm screaming for my survival. Get the hell out of here." And the wolf's like, "Yo, dude, I get it. Bye." And then it cuts to her walking through this winter wonderland. Maybe not a wonderland, a winter wasteland. Yeah. And she comes across the wolf that was approaching her camp earlier, and it's being eaten. And you're like, this is the part where it's like, what's eating the wolf? Like, what's the reveal here? And it turns out it's a deer, and you're like, why the hell is a deer eating a wolf? That doesn't make any sense. And then it turns, and you see it's half zombified. I'm like, oh, crazy. And then it cuts to State of Decay 3. Now, in and of itself, it's like, cool, it's a teaser trailer for another zombie game. I think the big thing here, and we talked about this when Undead Labs was acquired by Microsoft, is State of Decay 1 was cool, a neat little indie title. State of Decay 2, kind of rough, evolved the State of Decay formula, but still didn't seem like it was fully what people want from it. The moment they were acquired, it's like now you have the budget and the funding of Microsoft, and just like a game we'll get to a little bit later with Obsidian, Microsoft is like, what's your dream game? What's your vision? We'll back that. We want you to make that. And to me, I think State of Decay 3 will be the AAA high-quality jump that State of Decay fans have wanted. And it might not necessarily be like super polished AAA. It still might have its weird little quirks. But I do think we're going to see a jump from this is a cute indie AA title to, this is a first-party game, you know?
Yeah, there's 2 point of views you could have looking at this. Like you just said, it's another AA kind of game lacking polish. Or you can look at it from the optimistic point of view, which there's evidence to do so. Like you said, they've been acquired by Microsoft since then. They got some funding, and this CG trailer like looked dope. So like this is where this franchise becomes the next level thing. You know what I mean? Like, why not hope and assume that, I guess, instead of just throwing it out to the wolves as like unpolished crap, which I'm with you. I think it'll be like, this is going to be like a great AAA game, probably way more polished than the first 2 games, and like more depth to it, more scope, everything. I got the same vibe as you.
Well, yeah, the teaser trailer itself is way higher quality than any of the teasers we've seen for the first two State of Decays.
Right.
Because even the second one, if you remember, there's a trailer where they're driving in a car and he slams a zombie with the door, remember? That looked cool, but it wasn't high quality. Like, it was still, this is a AA-ish kind of game, right, in terms of budget. And, yeah, I do think the next time we see State of Decay 3, it'll be them showing, like, no, this is State of Decay now. And I do think there'll be a jaw-dropping moment for people, which will be really cool. I just think people need to set their expectations that it will be a jump from what we've seen with State of Decay 2, but don't expect it to go from State of Decay 2 to God of War or Last of Us. You know what I mean? Like, be a little bit realistic with the jump they're going to make. Yeah. Next up, we got Turn 10. They showed off Forza Motorsport, which interestingly enough wasn't Forza Motorsport 8, Dom. Just Forza Motorsport. Which has people wondering if they're just going to cut the number off and start anew and have it be a platform as well. 8 is kind of a high number if you're not Final Fantasy, right? So it kind of makes sense. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Why do we give Final Fantasy that pass, by the way? Good question for another day.
Because they're Japanese. Some people were surprised that this game isn't going to be a launch title, but we've known, Turn 10 said that the game's still a ways off. Like, we weren't going to really see much. And it is why they're marketing Dirt 5 so much for the launch of the console as well. Cool in-game footage for a racing game. It's what you expect. Super pretty. If you love cars, you're gonna think it's awesome. Um, to me, I wonder if, and this is something maybe you will have a different opinion on, Dom. People are looking at this and wondering, wow, I wonder why Forza Motorsport isn't coming out along the console the way the pattern has been. It should have came out last year, technically. So people thought, okay, at worst, it's coming out this year. Part of me thinks that maybe the reason Forza Motorsport was delayed is partially because of next gen hardware, right? They want to make that racing game look as beautiful as possible. But I wonder if, in the same sentence, Playground is putting so much effort into Fable, separate teams, obviously, from Horizon. But I wonder if they have some extra team from the racing side of Playground working on Fable, right? And their Horizon is going to be maybe a little bit delayed. So in that same sense, it's like, well, we don't need Forza Motorsport right now. You guys delay a little bit too, giving essentially Playground an extra year to focus on Fable. You know what I mean?
I could see that. Yeah. I was more thinking like this is gonna be more revolutionary than previous
That could also be
iterations.
the case as well. Yeah, could be both.
Not just like technically, because I think that a big part of it is that there's new hardware and we want to max that shit out. But maybe like they're doing some other weird new stuff that I am too dumb and ignorant to know about to make this like a, you know, like a redefining what this game has been. Because it's been 7 games. I could, could get exhausted on, the 8th Forza game. So maybe like they're taking that Assassin's Creed year off to like regroup, regather. What can we do to make this like next level? It's taking a bigger step this time.
Well, and that team too, Turn 10 and
2
Playground
years off. Whatever.
are like considered some of the best racing game studios in the world, bar none, right? And they hit it out of the park every time. Everyone's like,
Yeah.
there's no way this Forza can be better than the last. And it always is. And I wonder at what point as a studio you have to like sit back and take a reset and be like, we need to figure out a way to keep this going in a way we can handle because we're reaching this bar and setting a new one every other year. What is the new thing moving into next generation? And the break gives them enough space to be like, oh, we're just cutting off the 8. We're starting with what the new motorsport will be moving forward, right? I think you're on point with that. I just thought it was a weird thing that you could play into, like, because they'll delay a year, it gives them more time to innovate, but also gives Playground an extra year since they come after motorsport and they can focus on Fable at the same time. It's like a win-win, right, for both.
Yeah,
So.
I get that. Yeah, that's got to be part of it too. Yeah.
Next up, Everwild. This is a game I'm super excited for. We didn't get gameplay necessarily. You can make an argument that some of that stuff was probably like gameplay-ish, but we saw a look at more awesome creatures in this world. It was the Breath of the Wild-esque art that people fell in love with when it was revealed to XO19. This sold me even more. Would I have liked gameplay? Duh, obviously. But I do think they showed enough like new of the world that it wasn't just another logo, right? I think there was enough new there where people got a better feeling for the world. There's magic. There's like some resurrection going on. It alludes to multiplayer in some sense. I just got to say, this is like one of the most beautiful games I've seen recently. Like the art style, Rare killed it. It it's weird because you could see some of the elements of Sea of Thieves, but it doesn't have like necessarily the same faces, and the environments are like, I can't wait to see those on next gen. Like it's just gonna be so beautiful. What did you think?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I was like kind of I don't really know entirely what's going on here, what this game is supposed to play like, but that didn't really matter because it looked so cool. Like the art style was so cool. The creatures were really cool looking. And I was just like, yeah, I could see this. You know?
Yeah, I just love when artists create these weird dynamic creatures that we haven't seen before. Like they did a good job of those creatures. Don't look so alien that it's like, oh, this totally isn't Earth. But they don't look like animals we know necessarily. It's like these weird amalgamations,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like Avatar in a way, The Last Airbender, not the Pocahontas remake. um, anyways, next up, Don't Nod. We saw Tell Me Why. So this is their episodic story game. It features a transgender lead, which is really cool. They actually, if you guys haven't been paying attention, there's this fiasco going on right now with Deadly Premonition 2 and Swery in terms of how the trans characters are portrayed in that game. On top of the fact that the spoiler cast, which will be up before you watching or listening to this for Last of Us 2 that we did, one of my, I wouldn't say concerns, one of my issues with The Last of Us Part 2 was the trans character in that game. Um, and I think it's really cool that we're just starting to see generally more trans characters, right, in video games. It's dope. And the cool thing with this, Dom, is what's our problem with episodic games in general? what's the problem with episodic games?
Too long between episodes, right?
Exactly. So, not only did we find out that Tell Me Why's first episode is coming out August 27th, the second episode comes out the week after, and the third episode comes out the week after that. It's only 3 episodes, all releasing within 3 weeks of each other. I think that's really cool. It's the first, correct me if I'm wrong, the first example of like appointment viewing gaming. Like, oh, every Thursday the new episode's coming out and I get to play it for 3 weeks. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Because that was always, it felt like the promise of the Telltale games,
Yes.
where it was like one episode a month, but I don't think it ever actually amounted to
No.
that. Maybe it got close with some of them, but
It was like
always,
one, and then like 2, and then like 4.
right. So I mean, this looks cool. This is kind of a hard game to make a trailer for because it's like the story is so much a part of it, but you don't want to spoil the whole story, right?
For
but
sure.
I was into it, and this is like, we should probably get like in sync on this and do like a book club sort of thing as we play through these or something.
For sure, and it'll be on Gamecast, which is dope as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it looks really cool. I'm excited to play it, excited to see it. The story is intriguing. And once again, like, yeah, once a week being able to play it. And I assume it probably won't be longer than like 4 or 5 hours, right? Each one, which I would assume probably closer to 3. But yeah, it's really cool they're launching all in sequence like that. And to me, I hope Xbox partners with Don't Nod for the rest of the generation like this. And if we can get these episodic, you know, I don't know, experiences where it's like once a week, but maybe it only happens every like year and a half, right? I'd be totally down with that. But yeah, that's the problem with episodic games, and it seems like they're solving it. Hopefully, man, it would suck if that first episode comes out and then it's like, yo, episode 2 is delayed. I don't think it will. I think they probably waited to give a date until all 3 episodes were in the can.
Yeah.
Is my assumption.
You gotta assume that's how they did it. Yeah.
Next up, not a huge announcement, but Moon Studios said they're basically making an Xbox Series X version of Ori and the Will of the Wisps. It's going to be optimized for 120 FPS, which is crazy. And they touted performance and audio upgrades that weren't possible on current tech. And they also said smart delivery. So if you already own Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which is also in Game Pass, obviously, you'll get this free upgrade on the Xbox Series X as well. Really cool.
They said this kind of thing so many times, and I think it's super smart. Like, they said it with Halo. We're going to deliver a consistent 60 frames per second. A few other games said that, and then for Ori, like you just said, 120 frames per second on Series X, and it's like, I'm sitting over here like, yo, if it's like 30, then it's cool, right? But I know like frames per FPS is like, people are eating that shit up right now, and it matters, but they're really like taking advantage of like the hardware and like letting people know like Series X is going to be able to like really make this shit smooth and nice. So that was like a good way that they started selling that console specifically. I think was cool.
And I mean, I loved Ori and the Will of the Wisps. It's up there right now in contention for Game of the Year for me. But it did have a lot of like weird technical hiccups that I hope get ironed out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's that. Next up, which in my opinion, Dom, in this whole presentation, Obsidian kind of showed that they might end up being Microsoft's most valuable studio.
Yeah, they're that cash cow right now, I think.
Yeah. So first up, we got the Outer Worlds DLC. It's called Peril on Gorgon. It's coming out September 9th, really soon. A neat little tidbit at the end. He mentioned one of 2 planned expansions. So we're getting a second DLC for this game as well, which is an agreement they made with Private Division, obviously probably long before Microsoft purchased them. And another tidbit, Dom, do you remember a while back when we found out that the Outer Worlds, obviously the Outer Worlds and the Outer Wilds, the names are confusing, right? And then we found out that the writer of Outer Wilds was going to work at Obsidian on the Outer Worlds. I don't know if you remember that story we talked about.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember the guy's name, but yeah.
This expansion is written by him. Completely.
We're going to see the fruits of that labor. And that,
exactly. And I mean,
we'll have to play this expansion and then like go back to our conversation and what we thought it might end up looking like or something.
Yeah. It is cool though, because obviously the Outer Wilds had a lot of narrative stuff that people loved. So I'm really intrigued to see his twist on the Outer Worlds. He even made a tweet today. He's like, people thought I couldn't work on the Outer Wilds and the Outer Worlds, but I did. Like a nice little cheeky tweet.
That's
really
good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next up, we had Grounded, which is the Honey I Shrunk the Kids survival game. Really funny cyberpunk joke at the top of it.
Oh man!
Where they're like, if you're looking for the biggest game this year, yada yada yada, look out for Cyberpunk. But if you want the smallest game this year, look out for Grounded, which I thought was even brave. Brave is, I guess, too strong of a word. it was nice and open for Microsoft to do that because they're kind of pooping a little bit on Halo 5 in a way because it's like the
I
biggest
was
game.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was thinking the same thing. Like from one perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, you're saying Cyberpunk is bigger than Last of Us 2. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But you're also saying it's bigger than Halo Infinite. Um, so there's that. But then you're also calling, obviously it's a pun, but you're calling your game Grounded the smallest game, even though it's a pun. Some people might go away with that. I loved it though. I think it was a good joke,
Yeah.
and I think
And also, we can't forget that Cyberpunk has the marketing deal with Xbox. So it's like, for all intents
right.
and purposes, a general consumer, that is going to be an Xbox game, right? So it works. Um, yeah, they showed a Battletoads Easter egg, which is weird because we didn't even see Battletoads in this whole presentation. Which that'll be a conversation we have at the end about some of the games we didn't see. It's releasing 7/28, which is it'll be out after you listen to this podcast, but only in a couple of days it'll be out. I'm gonna hop into the open beta. Very intrigued to see how the survival game plays. My biggest question with these type of games is it fun enough solo, right, Dom?
Yeah.
Can I have a good enough experience with it? I love the art style. I would suggest if anybody out there has a fear of spiders, I don't know if I'd suggest playing this game because running into a giant spider as a little kid might be a little scary for some people out there, especially like in a dark cave. Um, the last thing from Obsidian, Dom, which we talked about, is one of my most anticipated games now. They came out and they said, "Oh, you might be wondering what the next big RPG from Obsidian is. Check it out." I was under the assumption we might get a logo or something.
Man.
We got this really cool CG trailer, which I would argue I think the end of it is gameplay to some extent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I'd say the
and
same.
basically it's a fantasy world. It takes place in the lore of Pillars of Eternity, but this is a first-person RPG, which is cool because I think it's going to be in the realm of, if for me and you have no ties to Pillars of Eternity, we're going to be able to get in, and the way Obsidian is a storyteller, we'll be fine. But people who have played Pillars of Eternity, I bet you there'll be a ton of really cool stuff for them for investing in that franchise, right? At the end of it, we see the typical but oh so awesome fantasy thing of you got a weapon in your right hand, you got magic in your left. The magic to me looks way more impressive than the closest comparison to this, which is Skyrim. He was doing like some Doctor Strange glyph stuff, which looked really cool. I got so much Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings vibes. I'm telling you, Dom, for a split second in this trailer at the beginning when they're firing the arrows, I thought this might be a licensed Lord of the Rings game from Obsidian. For a split second.
Can
I
you
was like, oh
imagine?
my God. Yeah. I love this. I've talked enough. I want to hear your impressions of seeing Avowed come up on screen.
No, this was dope. Like this is what brought this whole showcase to like, yeah, okay. This is like on the par with what PlayStation did. Like this is where not only is Xbox like blowing our minds with all this shit's coming to Game Pass, and Game Pass is cheap as hell, by the way. But like not only all that, but like our exclusives that we're now making are like gonna be like next level, like bomb dropping shit. Like this is like, to me, was just like the piece de resistance. Like this was just awesome. And this was like what I said before, what I assume Elder Scrolls 6 would look like, which is, I have high expectations for that.
Yeah.
That's what I
Which you
saw
should.
out of this. And it's Obsidian. We know they make a pretty damn good Fallout game, right? Which in New Vegas and Outer Worlds even is really good. So like to see them basically like, their own take on a fantasy RPG in first person, I'm ready for it. Like it was brief, but it looked good, and it was enough to get me super hyped. It's like, name after Elder Scrolls, what's like the next best first person fantasy RPG? I don't know. There's a lot of third person ones, right?
Yeah.
That are pretty good. But this was like, since Skyrim, like seeing that first person view and like how good that little magical glyph looked that you mentioned that he drew, and that sword in the right hand, like this was like what I've been waiting for Elder Scrolls 6, and it delivered. Teaser trailer, sure, but I'm ready.
You brought this up before the show. Can you tell people what Matt Booty's quote was about this?
Shit, what did I say? What did he say?
I was setting you up. Remember, he talked about how this is the game they wanted to make when they purchased them.
Yes, that's the other part. That, yeah, when Microsoft purchased Obsidian, they said, this is the game we want to make. And you got to think that Microsoft, like, this game specifically was part of the reason they bought Obsidian, because they believed in this game, and Obsidian obviously believes in this game. This is what they want to do. This is not only like this is just their passion. This is what they're gonna put it all into. And now they got the budget, and they got the Series X, which this is being built for, which is exciting to hear about. Might mean it's a little farther off, but still, I'm in for it. This was like my highlight of the show. I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah,
on this,
me
if you
too.
can't
I'm
tell.
so excited.
Yeah.
Next up, one of my only, I rarely get disappointed with stuff. One of my disappointments of the show was Ninja Theory not showing more of Senua's Saga.
Sure.
They talked about their scouting in Iceland, and that's the location of the game. And there's a cool behind the scenes video on their YouTube, which I'm gonna watch after we record this podcast. I haven't had a chance to go check it out. Yeah, and disappointment, I might be too strong of a word. I was just hoping to see that. And also, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I haven't even played the first game yet. But that teaser at the Game Awards last year was so good. And I do think they didn't need to show it necessarily. Like I think most people who have either played the game or haven't are sold on the second one. And I do think maybe they want to hold off till the next time we see it is like, yo, this is Hellblade 2, right? So I get it.
Dude, play
next,
that game. Like,
yeah, I will.
Pretty good.
Next up, Interior Night, who, if you didn't know, Dom, these are all former Quantic Dream people.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. As Dusk Falls, it's this beautiful stop motion game. It's their debut for the studio. I would describe it as like a stop motion narrative game. Very distinct art style. Looks like photographs that have been painted over.
They called it an interactive drama, I think.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So we often talk about innovative gameplay mechanics in terms of like, action-based games, right? This could be a new way for narrative-driven games to be told, where it's this stop-motion thing. Maybe not necessarily the same art style, but this could be a new way to tell stories that isn't a quote-unquote walking sim or, a dialogue boxes after boxes, right? I'm intrigued by it. I think this game could definitely be a dark horse that wins, art of the year or, narrative of the year. This looks like it could have the workings of something special, and the art style alone is really interesting.
Yeah, this one for me was like it created a lot of curiosity. I'm not like super hyped yet.
Yeah.
I mean, because it'll live and die by the story, right? Just like the other, the Don't Nod game. If the story doesn't hit, then it's not going to be good at all. So this, like, you have that same thing of like, this story looks like it should be good, but then the way that they're doing the animation is where it's like, okay, I'm curious to see how that's gonna work. I'm gonna stay open minded, even though it's weird as hell, right? But we'll see.
As the trailer went on too, it seemed more and more dynamic because you start off, it's like, oh, it's simply stop motion with some motion in it, like the money moving or whatever. But then at the end, when they showed like the police cars and then the light on the guy's face and then his eyes moving, I'm like, oh, this might be a lot more complex than it shows on the surface. And I wonder if that could be part of the gameplay too. Of as you get deeper into the story, the animations and stuff do become more complex because the story needs that, right? That'd be really interesting.
That is like one of my favorite things in games is when the story and the gameplay merge in a way like that. That's what I love so much about like God of War and The Last of Us, where like that, I didn't even think of that, but that sounds incredible what you just described.
Or on a simpler level inside, right? Where like by the end of that game, you're at the basic roots of what gameplay is because it fits the narrative. Still. Oh, you haven't played Inside?
Yeah, that's my
blind spot.
Gap of shame.
Yeah, I need to play Hellblade too. It's what a shame.
Yeah.
And lastly, we had Double Fine show off Psychonauts 2. They had a Jack Black appearance where he sings during this whole level, which I thought was cool. I know people are on the fence if you either love Jack Black or hate Jack Black. I'm a Jack Black super fan. Like, I love Jack Black. I'm glad he's involved with Double Fine at all. Remember, there was Brutal Legend that he was a star of that kind of flopped for the most part. I just think more games should bring in Jack Black if it fits. Obviously, Psychonauts 2, very comedic, very weird game, totally fits Jack Black's vibe. I was super cool to see this. My hope still, Dom, is I hope Double Fine's whole catalog comes to Game Pass so I can play the first Psychonauts. It's a blind. I have no love or hate for it. I just have never played it. A lot of Double Fine games actually. I never played Broken Age. Never played Full Throttle. None of those adventure titles. Which Psychonauts isn't an adventure title, but it also got delayed to 2021, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Remember, there was an article in Games Industry where Tim Schafer said because Microsoft bought us, we could put all the boss fights back in that we had to cut because of budget reasons.
Oh yeah.
So that's why it probably got delayed, as the scope probably increased a bit, because now they can do what they want to do with the game. So that's cool. I doubt Psychonauts 2 did anything for you, right?
No, I also like Jack Black a lot though, so I had fun watching this though.
Yeah. Underrated singer. Next up, real quick before we get to the predictions, Aaron Greenberg had a tweet that I thought was interesting. So after the show, Jez Corden, who's pretty popular on Twitter for Microsoft and Xbox related leaks and rumors and tweets and stuff, he was one of the first people to talk about Project Lockhart. If I'm pretty sure that's the case. He tweeted about the show and he thought it was a great show. That's irrelevant to the point I'm going to make. He said, we still haven't seen the Initiative or In Exile's AAA next-gen games, right?
Right.
We've heard the Initiative, obviously. We knew Exile and Obsidian were working on next-gen RPGs. And like we talked about, we saw Avowed, which is dope. So I can only imagine what the In Exile and the Initiative's games are. Aaron Greenberg replied to him and said, still more bullets in the chamber. And on its own, it's like, okay, whatever. Obviously, he's a marketing leader for Xbox. He's going to market this. But pair that with Matt Booty, who at the end of the show said, look forward to more stuff we're going to talk about later this year. I wonder if maybe we're going to see another presentation where they hold like the Initiative to go alongside the price of the console, right? Because that would be a good thing to patch into that with maybe Halo multiplayer of like, here's the price for the console. Here's a reason to look forward to our quadruple A game, you know? Who knows?
Yeah, no, and that's always that good tease that they. So I think Sony did the same kind of thing after their thing, where they were like, more to show later this year, right?
Yep, for sure.
Like, which gets you like, oh crap! But what you already showed was really, really freaking cool. And same thing here. Wow, what you just got done showing us was like really damn cool, and I'm already excited. And you're telling me there's more still in a month or two or whatever. So yeah, that's a great, great little hints and clues and teases from them. So I think you made a good point of like, yeah, the Halo multiplayer, I think, is just that's the biggest thing that's been missing so far. Not that like it's too late and the world is ending and Xbox is dead because they haven't shown it yet. No, like obviously they're gonna show us, you know what I mean, Halo Infinite's multiplayer, but it's like that's like the next thing that I, in the next month or two want to see from them and expect to see from them, and expect it to be pretty cool. So that would be a good thing to pair with, their next presentation, however it works, that goes along with the price and so on.
I would bet money that the day we get the price, they announce the date of the Halo Infinite beta. I would almost guarantee that happens.
Because there's got to be a beta, right? For the multiplayer.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's historic at this point of Halo having a beta for people to check out. Yeah, I would almost guarantee that we see that on the same day. Anyways, let's get to these predictions we had last week. I had some questions. Dom and I gave our answers to the best of our ability. The first question, how many of the 14 studios, excluding Xbox Game Studios, which is like the publishing arm of it, right? Technically is a studio, but it's like, whatever. How many will show up? I said 9. I said 10. Dom said 6. There was actually 9 that showed up, according to Phil Spencer.
Well
I'm going to
done.
say actually 8 showed up, though, because one of them is Xbox Game Studios, and I said that's excluded. So, with that in mind...
You're still closer, right?
No, we're both 2 apart. I said 10,
6.
you said 6, it was 8.
Okay.
The ones that didn't show, I'll say the ones that did show up. Undead showed up, right? State of Decay, 343 Halo, Obsidian with their suite of games, Ninja Theory, Rare, Turn 10, Playground, Double Fine, and then Xbox Game Studios.
You know what? We'll give you that point, though, because Obsidian had multiple games.
Okay.
I feel like
True.
Let's just round off on that, right?
Yeah. So we didn't see the Initiative, which we kind of expected. We didn't see Compulsion, which we kind of didn't expected. Yeah. Next up, do we see a WB property? Both of us said no. We were correct. Though if Lord of the Rings was Avowed, we could have been wrong. Next up, over under 6 minutes of uncut extended gameplay of Halo Infinite. Just came over the 6-minute mark. Did we see multiplayer? Both of us said no. So I got it correct because I said over and no. You got it half correct because you said under and no. So you only got half, unfortunately. Next up, will Xbox have third-party launch exclusives? I was a big dumb. I said no way. You said yes, of course. Stop being an idiot. Of course, you're right. Next up, will we see any more acquisitions? Both of us said no. Obviously, we took Greenberg's tweet at heart of like, no business here, guys. They were correct. Next up,
that means something though that we can trust when they say things like that, right? Like that means something.
Yes.
We don't doubt when they tell us something.
Well, that's one thing with Xbox, transparency, man. Been
Right.
killing it for as long as Phil's been in
Mhm.
charge, which is great. Next up, which of these pop up? Battletoads, Cuphead DLC, or Play Dead's
Damn
next
it.
game?
Damn.
I said Battletoads and Play Dead, which I could be very specific and say Battletoads did show up in Grounded, but obviously I'm not going to do that. And then you said Cuphead DLC. We were both wrong. None of those games showed.
Man.
From my assumption is Cuphead, we talked about that game, the art style takes so long to hand drawn stuff. COVID probably delayed it. Playdead's next game, they take like 6 years to make their game, so I probably was under in terms of their timeline. And then Battletoads, apparently when people played that game last year at E3, it wasn't that good. So I wonder if that game just got reworked completely, you know? It's one of those titles like it's a bummer Battletoads isn't coming out soon for people who love it, but I think for the vast majority, like just scrap that game and make a good version of it, you know? Whatever. So we both got that wrong. Next up, more gameplay of Fable or Everwild. We both said Everwild, and I said we were both correct. You could, it's a middle thing of like, I don't know if that was actually gameplay, but I'm gonna go with we saw more of Everwild than Fable, so thus we're correct.
Sure.
So, next up, lastly, what do they open and close the show with? We both nailed it. Open with Halo Infinite, close with Fable, of course. Bringing our scores to me, 5.5 out of 8 points. Dom, 5.5 out of 8 points.
Wow.
We tied.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
5.5 out of 8 is not bad, Dom. Not bad at all.
We got a pretty good tune of the industry right now. I feel good about 5.5.
I wonder what our scores would have been like if we did the same thing for PlayStation. I didn't think about doing prediction stuff because we were still in that like weird state of what are these events? How are we going to handle this with the podcast specifically? Because in years past we've done our predictions episodes for all the conferences, right? So I was still getting a hang on how we were going to handle this. But man, the moment that PlayStation August event gets dated, we're going to do some predictions there too. Obviously, not going to be a whole lot of games, but in terms of price and stuff, we'll figure it out. It was a good time. I enjoyed, we talked about at the top of the show if we enjoyed it or not. I really like this game showcase. For me, in terms of quality, from an unbiased perspective, I think they both maybe hit about the same. Going into a biased mindset, Xbox smoked me a little bit more because of some of the franchises they showed. I wasn't fully into like Godfall at all, right, for the PlayStation thing. So I lean a little bit that way, but they were both great. I really enjoyed them both.
Yeah. No, they were both really good, and I felt like similar in terms of like, like your couple of first party heavy hitters, and then some of those weird games, sprinkled throughout, and then some of your like third party like still heavy hitters, and then the smaller ones too. Like they both felt similar in strategy and scope. I guess the PlayStation one just like they revealed the console itself. Which is cool, I guess. But like I'm a sucker for Horizon Zero Dawn and Demon Souls and Spider-Man and stuff like that. So like some of those franchises I have a little bit more connection to. But like both are like both top tier like great showcases, especially in a year where like every other publisher is just falling the fuck asleep. Apparently, that's really hard.
And for them to deliver these with professional, like high quality structure to them, right? I think is really impressive. I'm not going to let PlayStation get away with this though. We cannot forget they opened with GTA 5, which is one of the weirdest things.
It was a bit weird.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the rest of that show and it's like, what? It's so weird. Yeah. I was actually prepared for us to see like Skyrim for Xbox or something weird too.
The day will come when we hear about, I don't know if it's going to make one of these big showcases, but Skyrim will get a specific version for Series X and PS5. It just will. Like, don't kid yourself, people.
I got a question for you. So Starfield, right? Do you think we see that game this year? Maybe at like the Game Awards? No. Completely quiet. Yeah. I'm excited, man. I want to see what Bethesda does with sci-fi. Space sci-fi. We'll see what happens. Obviously, it's not related to the Xbox stuff. We ran kind of long, obviously, talking about all the Xbox stuff, but I wanted to touch on what we've been playing because, first of all, I've been playing some more Spite with the Avatar skins, enjoying my time with that. I want to talk about Ghost of Tsushima real quick. Did you jump in at all, Dom?
I still have not. I want to. I plan on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm having a tough experience with Ghost of Tsushima. So, how will I say this? I'm about 5 hours in, okay? World is beautiful. I'm seeing a lot of the seams in this game for some reason, and it might be Last of Us Part Two itis or whatever the heck you called it when you
Syndrome.
tried playing Tomb Raider.
Naughty Dog
Uh,
syndrome.
Naughty Dog syndrome. Sorry. Um, or it could just be that it is what I expected, and I'm just not fully getting into it.
Probably
We talked
some of
about this a
both.
bit in chat. The lack of a lock-on mechanic in this game seems counterintuitive to the whole like 1v1 approach to combat specifically. I often find myself fighting the camera, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic of like, oh, it's always in the way, but it is to an extent where I have to worry about the camera, if that makes sense. Um, because you also find in this game early on that if you have like two or three miscues, you're gonna die. Like it's just gonna happen, and it's not rubbing me the right way necessarily. The Winds of Change or whatever the hell it's called, the navigation thing, it's cute and like I get what they're doing, but it just I don't know. It just isn't working for me. That's less of like a quality gripe, just more of a preference gripe, right? I'm not
Hmm.
like blaming him necessarily for that. The Remember before this game came out, people were talking about how the stealth in this game was not great and that the AI was kind of trash and like not smart. It's true. Like the AI is real bad in this game. Like
It's
real
true.
bad. Like it's easy mode stealth to the point I'm not spoiling the beginning of the game. There's a section at the beginning of the game where you have to stealth because they're teaching the stealth mechanics, right? Obviously, video game stuff. There's parts, Dom, where say you're standing straight looking forward, you crawl or squat next to these guys less than maybe 4 or 3 feet from them and walk in their line of sight to the left. And it's like, I don't, it just breaks the immersion. I'm like, I don't get how this is stealth necessarily. That being said, like the actual combat when you're hitting with swords and the challenge system where you walk up to a camp and you can challenge a guy to like
Oh
a
yeah.
really quick samurai fight, super cool. World is beautiful. The like just the world feel itself of like the ambient noise and the creatures and everything works. To me, and I'm very early on, right? 5 hours. It's Sekiro meets Assassin's Creed, but it never reaches the best parts of either of those, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
And to me, so far, and I hate labeling games with just a number, but it's the easiest way to get my feeling across generally. So far, this feels like a 7. Is a 7 a bad game? By no means. Is a 7 a great game? Probably not. Like it's a good
It's good.
experience. I don't yeah.
Yeah.
And that might change. Like there may be some tools I uncover or upgrade throughout the experience that changes things for me. But early on, man, the lack of a lock on is so apparent to me. Um and it probably comes from a position of me and you love the From games, and I know we
So
talk about
used to that.
From forever and ever, but
Yeah.
I've been spoiled with that combat, and I don't know. I like Ghost of Tsushima. I wanted to love it, and I don't know if I'll ever get there. You know, and it might be Naughty Dog syndrome, or it might just be I play a lot of open world games and I have certain expectations. Remember, I'm the guy that didn't like Breath of the Wild, so take that with a grain of salt. My opinion on this stuff, but yeah, I'm just not having a great time with it, but I am having a good time. So
Yeah. I need to try it out. I've just been lazy and I've been too busy with what I've been playing. Weirdly, is Dark Souls 3, which is territory that's been covered by
working
us
on that
many
plat,
times.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I dove right in and I felt great about it. And it's been a long time since I played it. And I had only played through this game once when it first came out. Um, as opposed to like the original Dark Souls and 2 and Bloodborne, which I've played through multiple times each. This one was one where I didn't get as deep into it as the others. So getting into it, I felt immediately comfortable. I'm doing well. It's still challenging and unfamiliar at parts, but it feels good. I'm like following a guide and I'm being more thorough and so on. It's going to take a couple playthroughs for this damn trophy, but I'm loving every second of it. I forgot, like, this is a really great game. So,
for sure. Next week we'll probably have some more video game announcements, some more news. Hopefully, we're getting close to August, and apparently the PlayStation and Xbox events are both in August, right? So we're getting up on those, and we're gonna have dates soon. I'm assuming Xbox will give theirs some room to breathe before they announce theirs, but PlayStation might want to Monday morning be like, "Hey, the Xbox thing, whatever. Look forward to our thing." You know what I mean?
try to steal back some of that media attention kind of conversation.
Yeah, and by the way, there was a direct that happened this week for Nintendo, and we didn't even talk about it because
It
yeah.
was a mini direct, and it was,
Yeah, they announced it Sunday at midnight. It happened at Monday at 7 a.m. If you're a huge fan of Shin Megami Tensei, which former guest of the show, Elisa, huge Shin Megami Tensei fan. She lost her mind for that stuff, I'm assuming, especially with the 3 Nocturne remake or whatever. But yeah, just Nintendo's in a weird place. I mean, not financially, they're killing it with Paper Mario and especially Animal Crossing selling like crazy. But in terms of wanting new games, it's like in a year with next gen, maybe I don't know if you feel the same way, Dom. Obviously, I've been playing Animal Crossing, so I'm a little bit different than you. But with everything on the horizon for Xbox and PlayStation, I'm not worried about Nintendo because I can hold off till next year because I have so much to look forward to already in the fall without Nintendo jamming in the Super Mario collections, which I'm worried because I'm going to spend money on those and then that's going to take away time from other stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, from a like looking at it from a personal point of view, I'm the same way. Like there's enough to do and I'll be good. I'm playing Dark Souls 3, man. That's gonna take me forever. And I still gotta get into Ghosts. So then by the time that's all done, it's like we got Cyberpunk, we got Halo, we got Spider-Man. Like it's gonna be a busy fall. So like from my perspective, I'm fine with Nintendo chilling until next year. But I gotta imagine from their perspective, they're a little worried because they want to carve into that, right? They want to
For
take
sure.
me away from Ghost of Tsushima to play Mario instead. I would think. But if they don't have it, then they don't have it. But that's what I think their view has got to be. And like you've said before, like the Japanese companies may have taken a COVID hit harder than some of the American ones. So
Other
it's
thing
tough,
we're
I
not
guess.
talking about that is a big deal, and it might not be some of the older demographic for Nintendo, but the big DLC chunk for Pokemon comes out this fall. We're not really talking about that either.
Oh,
The smaller one came out in June. The big one is the Crown Tundra, which is this fall. So that'll
okay.
satiate a lot of people too. Obviously, not all Nintendo fans, but we forget about that. Pokemon's huge,
It's a
so
big deal.
that DLC is a
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah. That's it for this week's show, guys. Thank you for listening. If you can, please go over to Spotify or iTunes, search us up Controlled Interest. We'll pop right up. On iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. It helps us move between the algorithm so you can find the show and others can find the show. On YouTube, search Controlled Interest. We'll pop right up. Hit the bell notification to know when we upload new videos because you can never trust YouTube sub boxes. On Twitter, you can follow us collectively at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interest abbreviated. You can follow me at Jerrad_. You can follow Dom at Dom's Oreos. If you haven't, the Last of Us Part 2 spoiler cast has gone live. It features me, features Dom, features frequent guest of the show, Chris Noons, and it features the guy who guested with me on the PlayStation event reactions, Max Roberts, formerly of DualShockers. Yeah, we talk about Last of Us, get into all of the spoilers, all of the nitty gritty, talk about what we love, talk about the things we didn't like, talk about all the characters, what worked, what didn't, all of that good stuff. Dom's computer took a poop in the middle of it, towards the end, not the middle. Dom wasn't in for the last 10 minutes, but he was there for the other hour and a half of goodness. So definitely check that out if you get a
Spoilers.
chance.
The ending was great.
Spoilers, yep. Thank you guys for
That's what I
listening.
missed.
Catch you guys next time.